Hello, this is One on One with Nashville Mayor Megan Barry. She was elected in August of 2015, becoming the first woman to hold the office of mayor in Nashville. Here's a look at her first year on the job.
To AJ Capital Partners, to Burger Company, Two Roads Hospitality, Our House Hospitality, all of you decided to invest in Nashville. And all I can say is, we'd love to have more of your money. So please don't stop. Thank you, and welcome to this beautiful space.
She holds the top position in Nashville government, the first woman to do so. Megan Barry's election as mayor in 2015 made history. In the months since, there have been other firsts by Nashville's new mayor, starting with a bold proposal for an operating budget that is one of the largest in the city's history, at $2.08 billion. With minor tweaking, it was approved by the City Council and includes increases for most city departments, across-the-board pay increases, and no property tax hike. Her administration comes at a time of phenomenal growth in Nashville, growth that has generated unprecedented tax revenues, low unemployment, and is propelling Nashville to become a destination city for businesses and new residents. That same growth is also presenting unparalleled needs and challenges. These are some of the best of times for Music City, and many hope the new mayor will have everyone singing in harmony. Well, welcome, Mayor Barry. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So it's been 1 year. Actually, you're into your second year now.
I am.
How do you think your first term is going?
I always let others make that determination, but I think Nashville has had a really good year.
Okay. You really started with a roar. I am woman, hear me roar. A big, bold budget, as we mentioned in the report, the largest in the city's history. First time it's over $2 billion. And I think you were quoted as saying this plan must be big and bold at the time. Why did you feel like you needed to start with such a big, ambitious plan?
Well, I think what we were able to do was take the dollars in this budget and allocate them to the priorities of Nashvillians. So this budget represented the biggest budget, but it also represented $121 million of new revenue that didn't come from a tax increase. And we were able to take those dollars and give those dollars over to Metro employees like our firefighters and police officers who hadn't had a raise, and then also to invest in other ways in our city.
Was it also sort of a seize the day, carpe diem moment? I mean, you just mentioned there were the unparalleled revenues. Was it like, okay, we've got to take advantage of this? Was there a little bit of that?
Sure.
If we wait, it may not be there.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to say that we also took some of those dollars and set them aside for a rainy day. So it's not as if we went out and spent every dollar. So I think when we look at Nashville's growth, we believe that it's going to continue to be strong, and that gives us an opportunity to do some really great things for Nashville.
I have to ask, were you nervous going in that maybe this is going to get slashed before it's approved by the council, and were you surprised at how they received it?
Well, I think the Metro Council, many of them are new, just like me, and we ran during the same time, and we ran on the same priorities. So I think that their priorities and my priorities align, and when that happens, we were able to come together with a budget that I think really reflected those priorities.
And not much haggling.
And not much haggling, which is a good thing.
Yes. In fact, I think, wasn't there something added to it?
We increased some funding for the Metro Arts, which of course is critical.
Glad to hear that.
Yes.
Very much an art supporter here
me too.
at NPT. So let's talk about some of the specifics. A lot of the budget is about capital spending, or is for capital spending. Millions of dollars for schools.
Yes.
For infrastructure, sidewalks, thank goodness. More paved roads. More offices, administrative office for the Sheriff's Department, and some of these have kind of led to some back and forth and debate, but why so much for infrastructure and capital spending?
Well, I think when you look at all the tremendous growth that Nashville has had, one of the things that I hear the most from constituents is wanting to make sure that the infrastructure is keeping up with the growth, and everybody wants a sidewalk. We put the most money into this budget that has been in a long time on sidewalks and paving. So, you know, my goal for sidewalks is to connect kids to schools and people to transit stops. So that's how we've looked at the lens, and I think we've made some real progress on that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned transit.
Yes.
And I know from talking with the folks at MTA that what you're doing with the sidewalks and other infrastructure projects is vital to the transit plan, the strategic transit plan.
Absolutely.
That has been, well, now it's been approved after a year of work. So tell me what the city is doing to make that happen, because all the work they've done for a year, and I think getting it approved is just step one.
It
and
is just step one.
It's expensive.
So the proposal is a $6 billion plan. Now that doesn't all come in year one, so that's the good news. But clearly, absolutely articulating the revenue streams that are going to support that are the next step. And we've been working with the chamber. We have a consultant who are helping to identify those streams, but that's also going to be a state conversation. I'm really excited about the fact that so much of the region has come together. It doesn't matter what party you're in, everybody wants transit fixed. And so we get together all the time around the counties and talk about this, and they're going to have to participate, and we're very excited about that.
We've almost gotten into a corner where we have to do something now, and I know on a daily basis, I feel like my commute, my transportation issues are double or triple what they used to be. And you've got a busy schedule. I'm sure you spend a lot, as busy as you are, and we saw you in the report at various, I'm sure you spend a lot of time sitting in traffic.
I do, so I can appreciate it. And I can tell you right now, our transit woes are not going to be solved with pedal taverns with brides on them. But we love those folks. And but I said this in my State of Metro, and I've said this throughout the conversation. It has to be big, and it does have to be bold, because we're at a crossroads right now. And the good news is that it won't take 25 years to build this out. We're going to have lots of short-term wins along the way, and we've already done a lot of our infrastructure around timing our lights. So you know, that helps with the throughput. It's those little things. We've done some sidewalk, crosswalk improvements, and we've looked at 16 of the most dangerous intersections where we've had pedestrian deaths, and we've made infrastructure improvements to 2 out of those 16 so far. So we're moving on all of this. You know, we can't wait till the end. So there's a lot of really good stuff going on.
As much as you say you're doing here in Nashville, and you mentioned your counterparts in surrounding areas, do you worry that Nashville will wind up carrying the bulk of the burden financially and logistically?
Well, my goal is to get equal participation from everybody who's going to be impacted.
How is that going so far?
Actually, it's going well. I mean, I think that there's some pieces at the state that have to be cleared as we talk about giving local option to municipalities. But the good news is that we're all pulling for this, because 50% of the people who work in Davidson County don't live here. So they're all coming from other places, and they're the ones experience a lot of this traffic flow. And trust me, they're letting their mayors know too.
I'm sure they are. I mean, we're all complaining about traffic. Squeaky wheel gets the oil.
That's right.
But really, this is related to growth in this area. And some people feel like we're growing too fast. And a number of your initiatives and projects deal with some of the challenges around growth. How do you manage that in a way that everybody's comfortable?
Sure. Well, I have to tell you, it's much better than the alternative. I have spent time with mayors across this country where they don't have 27 cranes in the air, and they are always saying, how do we get a crane or two? But you have to
because of the increased revenues.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason we had that $121 million of new revenue without a tax increase was because of our growth. But it has to be intentional. And I think that goes back to your question about, so what is the impact of growth on neighbors and neighborhoods and infrastructure? So, you know, we've been, through my department, you know, my office, we've been very thoughtful, I believe, about looking at each of those pieces. So we look at housing, transportation, education, job growth, and then quality of life, and take all of those pieces together to think about what growth means for each one of those.
Is there any model that we can think of that, you know, this will be Nashville, or Nashville will be similar to this in 5 years?
Well, I think it's much more about where we look to where we don't want to be.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think the cautionary tales of gridlock, and I just actually had the opportunity to meet with some folks this morning from California who think it's really easy to get around Nashville. So, I mean, I think we don't want to become
Guess
some
it
of that.
depends on your frame of reference,
Totally
whatever
does.
your lens is.
That's right. I think that's right. So, you know, the good news is there are a lot of cities out there that are doing some great things. Denver's a great example of regional transit that has come together to create funding mechanisms, and we look at those best practices, and that's helpful for us.
Okay. Another challenge with growth is development around housing.
Yeah.
And we've had housing prices skyrocket, which is good in many ways, but I hear a lot of folks who are working professionals wanting that home ownership experience who feel they're being priced out of the market. And you even said that many people who work in Nashville now live outside of Davidson County.
That's right.
A lot of people feel we've got to get a handle on this, and that doesn't even address the folks who are low income and aren't even able to compete. What are you doing about housing and affordable housing in particular?
Well, I think, you know, in my office that we actually have a whole approach to housing, and we have 2 dedicated resources looking at this, and have made, I think, some really good significant progress in the first year. You talk about, you know, our unhoused and our low income. We put $10 million into the Barnes Fund this year and are working with not-for-profits to help them build capacity to build housing. But that workforce housing, I think, is absolutely key.
And before we talk about that, explain for our viewers who don't know what the Barnes Fund is.
Sure, the Barnes Fund is a fund that helps developers access money to then build units, which is what we need to do, and it's a fund that we run. It came out of the general fund. And
so someone that's doing one of these big developments that in part may be contributing to the congestion has, as a part of that, has an incentive to include housing that is affordable as well as maybe the luxury component.
So we've got a couple of different tools. So the Barnes Fund is one specifically for not-for-profit developers, and we are currently taking proposals online right now. Anybody out there who's listening, we'd love to have you contact our office and if you're interested. But we also are working with for-profit developers on that incentive component to make them, basically neutral. So if they build a unit for affordable housing, it doesn't cost them anything more than if they built a luxury unit. And I think that's really unique, that we're actually doing something that's different than other places across the country to incent developers to do that. It's voluntary.
So it's kind of parallel. It may not necessarily be in the same development, but if they're doing one here, they may be incentivized to do something affordable over here.
Yes, and they can be in both as well, because we know that mixed income is the best way for people to not be in poverty.
How's it going over with developers?
It's actually, developers are oftentimes leery of things when things start, but we're getting a really good response.
Anything in the works?
Yeah, well, out of another project that we've got right now, we just completed the Metro Council final sign-off for a project at 12th and Wedgwood, where we are actually doing a ground lease because we own the land, and we've got a for-profit developer who's going to build 130 units of housing that's going to hit those working professionals.
That's our neighbors.
That's our neighbors.
There
you go.
It's right down the road from where we're talking.
So so I think that the message that is, from my perspective, is there's not one silver bullet that solves this. It's all these different pieces that you have to put together, and we're trying to create all those tools in the toolbox to make that happen.
I bet there are some cities or municipalities that are looking to this as a model.
They are.
Are you hearing from
others?
Yes,
and we want to. They will, of course, want to see how it's going here.
Yes,
But and I think that's always great. We do a lot of sharing around the country with best practices and other mayors, and I look forward to being able to tell this story.
Okay. Another thing that you have done in a very bold and ambitious way is tackle some social issues that are sensitive for many people to talk about and can be divisive. And a lot of them stem from issues around race and justice and youth violence. And I want you to talk some about why within weeks of taking office, you tackled youth violence and you started a series of talks. I want to know why you chose that to focus on so early and what has become of that.
Sure. So when I came into office, we could see that the youth violence numbers were trending in the wrong direction. Youth on youth violence and just youth who were getting caught up in just violent acts across our community. We convened several different groups, but then the culmination was 400 of our public high school students who came together at Rocketown to talk about what they needed from the adults in their life. I think the best comment came from one child who said, you know, you ask us to walk a tightrope, but sometimes we fall. We need a safety net. And that really struck home for my team. And so what we did is said, okay, what does that look like? Well, our kids need opportunity and they need hope. And connecting
Opportunity in terms of things to do with their time.
Right, and hope for their future. So we've created what is called Opportunity Now. It will put 10,000 of our kids to work next summer in paid, meaningful internships. Because we know that if kids are busy and if they get their first job, they'll get their second and their third and their fourth. In fact, the ribbon cutting I was at earlier today, the young CEO of the hotel got her start as a night watch person at a hotel. Your first job doesn't have to be your last job, but you got to have that first job.
10,000. Now this is a summer program.
This is a summer program, but we're targeting youth 14 to 24, and the hope is that those 18 to 24-year-olds will be in employment opportunities that will lead to long-term employment.
Who are the employers?
Oh gosh, so we are out in the community every day knocking on doors and saying, all right, we need you to pony up for jobs. 7,500 of these jobs have to come from the private sector, and 2,500 of them are going to come from government and not-for-profits. So we can put a lot of kids to work in our parks department, those 14 and 15-year-olds who can help in our community centers. But those other jobs, those 18 to 24-year-olds, need to be in jobs that are going to lead to full-time employment.
And will it be open to all youth in that category? Is there an income requirement?
Nope. It's 10,000 youth. We want everybody in Nashville to help us find those jobs and also to help us find those youth.
Okay. Now, what do you think will be the impact of that? I know you heard this young person at the forum mention that, but what do you think? What do your team and your experts tell you can happen with this program?
So what this program will do is it's designed to not only help with the job placement, but also on the front end to give some pretty basic skills to our kids on those social emotional components that will make you successful in the workplace. And because there's a paid financial component, we're going to have that financial literacy piece so that you know what to do with money. So this is a much
something you don't get in
no,
school.
You don't.
None of us did. That still apparently is okay.
Exactly.
He learned that the hard way.
That you do. So I think all of those pieces together are going to be a benefit to our kids. But I will tell you that we have so many folks. Brenda Wynn is a good friend of mine, and she talks a lot about how she got her start in our parks department back when she was 14 and 15, and that was one of her first jobs, and that led her then to be an elected official in Davidson County. I mean, I think it's just about opening those doors and giving our kids something to do.
Okay. The other thing that I don't know if it really came out of the impact of these talks, but you have tackled race and justice very aggressively with a number of forums in the community, and I'm pretty sure that this was prompted by some of the things we saw in other cities, especially black men being shot by police officers, the protest by Black Lives Matter and other groups. Tell me what you thought would be the benefit of having these community talks, and what is the purpose of it?
So President Obama challenged all cities after some of those incidents happened to have frank conversations about race and equity and leadership. They're called real dialogues because they're about race, equity, and leadership. And we had our first one back in July where we brought together 100 not-for-profit and faith-based and community leaders to just talk about what this means to them. And Lipscomb was a great partner in helping us facilitate through their conflict management. That led us to 1,000 people at the Music City Center, where we had really impactful dialogue about all of these issues. Education was the one thing that people wanted to talk about the most, but now taking that results and saying, okay, well, what are the actions that come out of that? I'm a real believer that my role is, as the mayor, is to be a convener, to take those really difficult conversations and have them, but then to lead to action, because you can talk a thing to death. We know that. So you will see actually some impact and meaningful actions that will come out of that, just like came out of the youth violence forums with our jobs program.
It's also true, correct, that policing was a big issue as well.
Yep.
And that certainly is what we've seen in other cities. Do you wonder if what has happened in some other cities could happen here with police officers and people of color and the conflicts that have arisen?
Well, I think that Nashville has a long history of confronting issues in a non-violent way. So my hope is that that spirit is still very strong here. But I think there's always potential for that. So we have to look at it through the lens of what do we do to prevent that, and we've taken a look at President Obama's 21st century policing initiative and said, okay, what do we do and what can we do better? We have diversity training for our police officers. We have de-escalation training. We have bias training, but we can do more. And so, do
you feel the police department is working with you the way you would like for it to?
Yeah, Chief Anderson is absolutely on board. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I spend a lot of time with police officers, and they just want to serve our community, and they want to serve all of Nashville, and so they want to go home at night too. And so the goal is to be a public servant and also to make sure everybody's safe.
What you said, there will be tangible things to come out of this. And one thing that I know some people have pointed to is economic empowerment as being very important. Is that one of the things that might come out of this? And be more specific about what sorts of things might happen.
Sure, and not to preempt what we will ultimately say, but economic empowerment is critical. And in fact, so much so that when I came into office, I created in my office the Office of Economic Empowerment and Opportunity. And I think that we know that lifting people up out of poverty is so important, and that also helps address a lot of these other issues that we're talking about. So as we are focused on that, you will see development in parts of town that have not traditionally had development. You're going to see opportunities around more engagement with the community where there hasn't been that engagement, and ultimately it is about those jobs. So we have a workforce development component in my office that is partnering with the state and with a lot of these other places to put people to work. The good news is that our unemployment rate is down, but we still have lots of people who are underemployed and unemployed, and that's our goal.
All right. A lot of the growth that we have in this community are new residents, and many of them are new Americans. We have a large immigrant population here, and we at NPT have done a lot of work through our next door.
Yes, you guys have done a lot of stuff. It's great stuff.
We have our Next Door Neighbors project, and you have recognized this particular population and some of the needs and challenges around immigrant residents. What are you doing in that regard?
Well, we also have an Office of New Americans. Focusing on helping them, and I think we use that language. They're no longer refugees, they're no longer immigrants, they're now new Americans.
Yes.
And they're Nashvillians, and so how do we get them on the right footing to make them successful? We have about 130 languages spoken in our public schools. What a gift. I look at that and think those kids need to be English proficient, but they also need to keep that first language or that second language, because that's going to make us a global economy. And so, there's so many great things going on.
What is the purpose of the office? Is this to allow things like what you said for these folks to sort of continue to honor their prior culture and learn more about our culture, or is it to help them assimilate?
It's a combination. We have a process that we do where we bring in lots of the folks in the New American community to help them with leadership so that they can become leaders in Nashville. But it's also a lot of that high touch, helping them connect to resources. We find that so much of our New American population are entrepreneurs, and helping them figure out and navigate what they need to navigate in government.
Okay. Well, you know, we acknowledged at the very beginning the historic
Yep.
nature of your election. It's well acknowledged that you're the first woman mayor of Nashville. And nationally, there's a lot of talk right now about gender and power, especially gender and political power, and some of the challenges that women continue to experience in many settings, even at the top leadership positions like yours. And I'm sure you're keeping up with things just like the rest of us, but I just have to ask you if how you navigate those issues of that may occur, gender bias, gender harassment, and issues that creep up no matter what your position at the height of power.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I've been in business for 20 years before I got into this position, so that's not unfamiliar territory, but I find that when you approach and work with people as people, that makes a difference. But you know, I actually believe that women do lead a little differently, and so I think we are more collaborative. I think that we do take that conflict to conversation to action. But I'll tell you, the most exciting thing about being at this moment in time is that I get to be a role model for the girls who are going to come after me, and I see them all the time. And in fact, I was not too long ago was marching in a parade, and there were 3 little girls on the stoop, and somebody yelled out, "Hey, here comes the mayor." And they looked at the guys behind me and said, "Well, which one is he?" And I said, no, I'm actually the mayor. And they said, "Really? You mean a girl can be the mayor?" And that's what I love.
Lead like a girl?
That's right. Lead like a girl. So I love
That's
that's I get to be the first, but they get to come after, and that it won't be a big deal.
Do you feel like you need to speak out about issues around gender more because of your position?
Oh, I think that when you come into a new administration, you get to take a look with a different lens. One of the things that struck me when I came in was that Metro actually doesn't have a maternity leave policy.
Really?
That's what I said.
Oh my goodness.
Now,
okay.
they're a maternity and paternity leave. So since I've come into office, we will have our 5th baby in 1 year from just my office. Wow, don't drink the water. But apparently,
Okay.
but you know, what a gap. Now, I'm not saying that the folks who came before me didn't care about it. I'm just saying I don't think they actually took a look at it. So,
And will it be family leave? Because you know
yes,
we do
ma'am.
Aging Matters
That
here,
all-
and a lot of sandwich
that's-
generation workers.
Absolutely. So what we have is I have this powerhouse gender equity task force that is coming back with recommendations headed up by a couple of great folks in the community who are going to say, look, this is what you need to do. And then when we get to budget time, we'll be able to make those changes to what we need to do.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left. And
this went
going
really
into,
fast.
I know it did. It did. And it's been very enlightening. And I just want to know if you can give us just a hint of what's next. We're going into year 2. And I'm sure you're getting ready probably for your State of Metro address soon. So what's next? And how are you feeling about the next several years?
So, you know, I think that Nashville's in a really great place. It never ceases to amaze me that what makes Nashville different is, I think, what we say is, what can I do for you? Not what can you do for me? And I hear that all the time. We are a place that is warm and welcoming. I think that's going to continue. And I think that as you see us take on the challenges and opportunities of transit, housing, economic growth, education, and quality of life, that's what we're focused on.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have, but we really appreciate you being here with
my
us
pleasure.
and talking about your first year in office, Mayor Megan Barry. And thank you for joining us for today's segment of One on One. Have a good day.